Good evening, everybody. So lovely to see you. Good evening in WA, of course, but good morning and good afternoon to wherever you are in the world. And we're so pleased to have you to come to our second in our series, the Quantum Girls panel discussions and interviews. Tonight, I'm so pleased to be interviewing an amazing woman. The only adjective you can use is amazing. At the age of 14, she founded and created a quantum startup company in New York, which is so prominent, over 30,000 members. Can't wait to talk to her. Anisha Musti, very well known in the global quantum computing industry, and it's a pleasure. Now, Eamon Darcy is my name. I'm the Quantum Girls Advisory Committee member. And as I say, very pleased to take this discussion panel to you tonight, this interview tonight. Couple of things. The Quantum Girls Project is funded by the Australian federal government to a tune of just under $1 million. And in 6 weeks' time, we're all going to Canberra to present our case for a bit more funding soon and for exactly what we're doing. So we're absolutely pleased. And we've also got the Emeritus David Blair, Professor David Blair just joined us. David was the founder of Einstein First, and Quantum Girls is basically an extension of Einstein First. And the Einstein First is the major national launch, incorporating Quantum Girls in 6 weeks' time at Canberra, presenting to the Minister of Industry and Science, Ed Husic, the Right Honourable Ed Husic. So there's lots happening, but the most important people here are you and the young schoolgirls and boys. Now, we know we're the Quantum Girls, but we actually totally welcome boys in as well. There will just be some occasions where we will just use, where we will just have workshops and things like that for girls. But with no further ado, let me bring on Anisha Musti, and I'll bring on, Professor David Blair, the man who started all of this. So,
hello.
Hi,
nice
David.
to meet you. Looking forward to hearing your talk.
Yes. We've got so much to learn from Anisha, and why don't we start learning straight away? So, Anisha, tell us a little bit about where QMunity is now, and then your journey, and how did you do it, and can anybody do it?
Yeah. So when I started QMunity, as you said, I was 14 years old. So in a large part, it was inspired by my own experience in quantum, which was the difficulty finding accessible resources for my skill level. And that was just minimal mathematics, minimal computer science, and even just technology as a whole, but not a lack of interest. And what we've been building out for the past couple of years is this platform for students that allows them to learn quantum computing without necessarily going and getting a post-secondary education. But in the past couple of past year, what we've been noticing is that a lot of the content that we've been creating, which we created for students, ended up being beneficial to a larger audience. So whereas this like no prerequisites approach to education was very beneficial for college students and high school students, we also saw people who were doing a career transition or business people who were interested in getting quantum adopted into their business. So what we've been working on recently is how can we actually improve that as a segment of our audience and look towards business folk as that. And to answer your question can anyone do it? Absolutely. I think the main thing when it comes to quantum specifically is just that you have to believe you can do it, because it is very tough. Like the grit is necessary for you to be able to go scrounge for different resources and dive into that pretty complicated world. But then if it comes to something starting something like Community as well, I mean, as long as you have an idea and the drive to start it, that's totally something anything can do. Like at 14, there's definitely no skills that I had that made it any more like Community would succeed over anything else. But I think it was more so just like having a wonderful team who similarly shared the vision and that passion that all of us had was what made it work. And I think everyone here, the fact that you're watching this on an evening versus like watching Netflix or something like that shows that
Yes.
you do have passion.
Oh, that's wonderful. Exactly. And to do all of that at 14 is amazing. So how many couple of questions. How would you describe Community?
Hmm. So
And how many countries are you in at the moment? You know, is it?
yeah. So I would describe Community as a global platform for individuals to learn quantum computing.
Yes.
Um, and more specifically, a way for them to do it without necessarily having any other prerequisites. And
Great.
when it comes to countries, we honestly, the numbers just it's hard to even count at this point because we just have people like email addresses from various like locations. Like we sometimes when we host events, it's actually fun to see these people up close. We recently had someone from Syria join us, Sweden. A lot of countries like Australia, for example, have always been big in the quantum space, but recently we've been seeing even people from these smaller countries, like even Tunisia. They've been coming to some of our events, and that's just so wonderful to see.
Oh, isn't it amazing that you can have
Yeah.
such a global reach? I've had a question come in already, which I think is a really good one. How important to you, and I know it is important to you, how important to you is inclusivity? In
Very
fact,
much.
yes, that's a part of how you really started it, isn't it?
Yes, the whole idea of Community is about the idea of the inclusivity of youth in quantum. But personally, I think what the question might be more targeted towards is people of different sexual orientations, gender identities, and ethnic backgrounds. Inclusion of all of those different types of people is very important because all of those people have different lived experiences and because of that have a different perspective to bring. So when there is a conversation about any sort of progress, be it technological or societal, it is most important that there is diversity at the table as well. And that's something that we've been doing our best to try to foster when we do have competitions, for example. We typically try to award a a monetary prize to like a group that is specifically minorities. Like for example, when we had our hackathon, there was first place, second place, third place, and then there was also a best women like girls team, like all girls team, just so we can reward and recognize those efforts as well, and even spur people to do similar things and create all girls teams because they have just a good chance of succeeding.
That's amazing. And a hackathon is something that Quantum Girls is looking forward to doing at the end of the year. We're
Yeah.
presenting our ideas to the minister. We'd certainly love to talk to you and learn how things went for you. But to
Yeah.
go back to that 14-year-old girl, what actually made you, instead of just being an observer and a listener, what gave you the courage even to
Yeah.
actually do something?
Absolutely. So I will say Community as what it is today is not at all what I pictured when I was 14 years old.
No.
A lot of it came just by I had an idea, this idea that youth are not in quantum, and my first thought was, why don't I do a hackathon? And this seemed like something I could do. I was something like in my head, I was like, okay, rather than maybe facing this daunting proposition of like starting a company, I would just start a hackathon. And the company thought never really even crossed my mind or like creating an organization. And then with that hackathon, after just seeing the support and the messages that we were receiving for the idea that the hackathon was perpetuating, then that was really when, okay, wait, this could really be a company. That idea started to take form. And I would say for anyone looking, maybe even at this age, I think the main thing is just to like train yourself in life to just have a bias towards action and just genuinely like
That's
working
a good.
towards taking action on the things that you want to do. Because I think a lot of us, we have a tendency to think a lot and have to plan every single step of the way, even like
Yes.
years down the line. But a lot of creativity comes from just taking like a very small formed idea and just going forward with it.
Yes, look, David, Professor David Blair's just asked, um, Anisha, could you tell us a bit about how you did hackathons and what
Yeah.
the themes were? And do they have to be coding or did you have other themes? Great question,
Yeah.
David.
So this is a dilemma that my team faced as well, because hackathons are typically you code something or you build something, but we didn't want anyone who didn't have like a certain level of computer science experience to be excluded. So what our team did is we made the prompt generally very broad, where we said identify a global problem there that you can see, tell us about it, and then tell us how quantum computing can be a solution and build the prototype. So what we saw was that there was generally two ways that people approached this. One was a business sense. So we saw a lot of
Yes.
people develop actually like business like plans for a company, for example. Like I remember one of the projects was someone's business proposal about how a financial like private equity company could incorporate quantum computing, and they created that like whole plan. And then other people would take a more traditional approach where they would just identify a problem and start coding the solution. But we really like this because as an industry, quantum computing needs business people, it needs scientists as
Yes.
well, it needs researchers. So I feel like we really had like both sides of the spectrum there. And I either way, people were creating something, and that's really what a hackathon is about, is getting out there and building something, be it technical or non-technical.
Yes, and I really do like the way that you were seeking an audience that didn't know everything. And whenever I talk to young people, obviously they don't know an awful lot about quantum computing. And I'm guessing that at 14, you didn't either,
No,
but
I
you could.
didn't. I thought I did, and then I quickly realized I was wrong.
Are you a nerd?
Um, I would say in a sense, yes. I think most people have a little nerdiness when you start talking about the things that get them nerdy. Like for example, like I'm pretty nerdy about quantum computing. Some of my friends are very nerdy about soccer, and it really just like when you find something you're passionate about, it's hard to not be a nerd about it.
That's very wise words. Yes, indeed. So, did you get any help from the government, any funding or
Yeah, not
any
the
private
government.
investor?
Not the government specifically. We've been
Mm,
we mostly we haven't really relied on investment because we are a nonprofit organization, so it didn't make
yeah,
sense in that for that. But what we've been doing is we began with a lot of donations, especially when we were in like that let's do hackathons, let's do workshops phase of the organization. But when it started switching was when we were like, okay, to make better products um for our community, we need to invest in them. And that investment requires money, whether we're investing in new courses or even just raising money to offer prizes at hackathons. So we looked
yeah.
into models that actually made us like profitable and self-sustainable within ourselves without relying on investment or donations.
Does that include a lot of voluntary help, volunteers involved?
Yes, definitely. A lot of
Yes.
voluntary help because all of our speakers that we have at events, a lot of our team members, they are on a voluntary basis. So our we don't necessarily need our operating costs are not that high. But yeah, what
No.
we've been working on is covering all of that with just like within our own self-sustainable cycle.
Yes, exactly. So, looking towards the future, what industries do you see quantum computing affecting the most, and how soon? Because everybody's always saying, when is it going to hit us? And yes, what's your view of the near future and maybe
Yeah.
the distant future?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably post-quantum cryptography is what we will be seeing
Yes.
first. I think maybe I don't know if we'll have a full-fledged solution in 5 years, but I think in around 5 years, we'll have an idea of what that full-fledged solution will start to look like and have an idea of what that is. And then I think within the decade, we will see that come about, just mainly because of the sheer investment and time that various people and the urgency too that that situation requires. Like, while it would be nice to have quantum optimization, that doesn't have such a pressing timeline. Whereas with post-quantum cryptography, I almost feel like various government agencies view it as like a countdown to doomsday if we don't figure it out. So I think
Yes.
that's definitely the thing that we'll see first in the near future, and then I think quickly after that, will be many of the other quantum areas that we talk about in media or just like in conversations.
Yes, yes, the usual ones like chemistry and materials and
Yeah.
things like that. I've got. I'll just quickly put up one of your many um, fields that you've been involved with. You were involved with International Women's Day,
Yes,
talking about all the
with
quantum stuff.
cryptocurrency. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
let me go through the five of them, and you can comment on any of them if you so wish. But you've done so much; it's unbelievable. So that was the International Women's Day. Then you've got the Women in Quantum, uh, and what you've done there, and then you gave a talk on quantum teleportation,
Yep.
which of course is a wonderful topic that always excites people. I normally
Yeah.
introduce quantum teleportation to young people very quickly, so it gets
Yeah.
them interested.
I was
Yes,
14 I was 14 years old in that video. So
you were 14 years old then.
in that video, yeah, it's crazy to see.
That is fantastic. I
Yeah.
keep telling people because I talk about you a lot because I do admire you very much. And I'm always saying, how many Anishas do we have in West Australia? And in fact, how many are watching now? So you've really just got to do these things. So to do a presentation on something like that, and I always tell people how easy quantum teleportation is. It's
Yeah.
in our world, the atomic world, the macro world. It's something that's impossible, but in the quantum world, it's something that's a fundamental part of quantum physics. So that's
Mhm.
wonderful. And what was this? QSVMs for Parkinson's.
Yeah, so when my first ever, like, project in quantum was building a support vector machine for the detection of Parkinson's disease. So I made a video just explaining a little bit about how it works, and I don't remember how old I was, but I was probably, like, 15 or 16 or something, and they're very embarrassing to watch back in time.
Well, I'm here to embarrass you. That's my
Yeah.
job. And then, yes, I did want to mention the hackathon that you did.
Mhm.
We're also going to be doing some STEM classes. So workshops and with STEM subjects. Have you done a lot of that as well? I'm
Yes, we
guessing.
have. Mhm.
Yeah, and how have you organised them, and how receptive has the target audience been?
Yeah, so do you mean how close to students has the audience been?
Yes. So uh, when you've said we're going to be holding a STEM workshop, talking about different things, has everybody been, oh, great idea, let's get up and do it?
Yeah, actually, yeah. So when we have workshops, so sometimes we just invite speakers in to come and speak to our audience, and this
Mhm.
can be on anything from like machine learning to quantum biology. We see that a lot of the audience isn't students then, and that's when it's just like the whole community comes together and wants to learn about this subject. But we do keep the events like the hackathons to just students because we don't want people with like who have gone to grad school and like trained themselves in quantum computing to be competing against a 15-year-old high school student who like is
No.
just learning the foundations of Qiskit. It just feels a little demotivating and counterproductive to the mission and the message that we're trying to push. But yes, we do try to include every person that we can in our audience and keep it as centered as we can on that beginner section. And that's really like also, as I was discussing the pivot that we're making earlier into creating courses and content for more the business side of quantum. That's what we're working on. Just so we have like
Yes.
also another place for other people who are interested in quantum but not interested in the technical aspect.
Yes, indeed. I know that a barrier to the whole quantum physics and quantum computer thing is the word quantum. It
Yeah.
because young, yeah, unfortunately, because young schoolgirls and schoolboys don't relate to it. They see it as something that only scientists understand. What would your advice be to a 14, 15-year-old schoolgirl today?
Yeah, I mean, the word quantum, as you said, it's a blessing and a curse because I think
Yes.
in many scenarios it works to excite someone. For example, like the fact that it was called quantum computing to me is what got me interested in it, just because it seemed so otherworldly. But I think once you get past that initial excitement, you just feel like the task is very daunting. And yeah, it really has that's a two-way street there. But I think my advice to anyone who's looking to get involved is just, and this is just advice in general, when you see something that you are passionate or interested in, is we can spend a lot of time like watching videos, taking courses, but my advice is just honestly to start doing. Like even when I was 14 years old and I honestly probably knew nothing, I am very embarrassed to go back and watch my old YouTube videos to see if
Yes.
they're even factually accurate. But I was sitting there making things, writing up articles, and just doing all the time. And what you do is you gain momentum. And when you continue doing things, like that eventually led to me attending a conference in Brooklyn, New York, which is where I met a bunch of people in the quantum industry who inspired me to start community. And it's just building that momentum, starting to do is probably the most important thing. And it doesn't really matter what you do. Just I would advise anyone just not to spend like months and months and months just sitting and learning and just simply absorbing, because it's you could also actively learn.
Yes.
Like start a blog or something. It would be nice.
I couldn't agree with you more. I always say if you really want to understand the subject,
Right.
then lecture in it. The best
Yeah.
thing you can do, because you get questions from
Right.
left field and you start learning things. And I always encourage my students to present to their parents and family. Over the next
Yeah.
barbecue, just, you know, talk about what you've learned, because this is an incredibly exciting technology, and what we still don't understand it, which is half of its charm.
Yeah, and I honestly I didn't believe people when they were like, "Yeah, present to your
Yes.
parents, it'll be so beneficial." I was like, "Nah, it's fine. I'll just I'll practice on my own." But I think for me, when I was like starting to present my research, which can get pretty complicated at various different conferences and competitions, what I noticed is that when I talked to my parents, they would ask me the most rudimentary questions that
Yes.
I didn't even think about, because it's something that I, for example, just accepted as fact just by being around quantum people, but to them it didn't make sense. So it really pushed me to go back to those first principles and start thinking about it from the ground level. And it could also be like a friend who you doesn't don't think has any quantum experience, but just being pushed on your ideas teaches you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I see that, time and time again. And the parents are quite often worried that quantum computing is a long way away. But as you say, talking about PQC, this is something that's coming in right now. The US government, as we talk, is migrating every single document to a quantum
Yep.
resilient server.
Mhm.
So that is that is amazing in itself. What advice would you give to the parent of somebody wanting to get into this technology?
Yeah, definitely. I think a main concern that I've heard from parents is that it's not an employable industry the same way that getting a more standard education in computer science or some other like established field is. But I think this advice really carries into what I would say to anyone interested in anything. But I think passion comes first. Mainly when you find something that you're excited about, you are more driven to actually thrive there. And when you thrive, you can honestly make money doing most things because if yeah, there's money in everything if you're creative and if you put enough time to find that path. It's just more so like if you push yourself into a career that you're not as passionate about, then you're not, maybe you won't make as much money or be as employable because you just don't have that drive or that passion to succeed there. So yeah, passion I think is always just number one when you're doing that. So if someone's passionate about quantum, go for it and worry about the other aspects of it later.
Yes, again, I think it's great advice. There's
Yeah.
also a question come in. Anisha, I was wondering how much your family helped you get involved with this.
Not really at all. I don't
Okay.
think my parents actually even knew that I was like researching quantum computing in my bedroom until my YouTube videos started popping up, and they were like, "What is happening here?" Um, yeah, so that, but yeah, really with community, they've always been supportive, and whenever I've needed
Yes.
something or they've been there, but yeah, it was mostly just like me trying to figure things out on my own and working step by step. They both don't work in anything related to the quantum industry, so they didn't really have much that they could say. But yeah, they were always like emotionally supportive in that sense. Hmm.
Yes, wonderful. And I've had a question from one of my friends actually, who I'm always talking should get her daughter involved in the industry. But she's asking, where do you see community being in 5 to 10 years' time? And community and society in general. What will be the biggest difference which will happen within a decade?
Yeah, so I'll start with community because it's the same vision that we've had pretty much since I decided to take community into a full-fledged organization. The vision has been just a go-to spot for quantum computing learning. And I know that's very subjective, but honestly, most visions are subjective. It's just
Well said.
a world that you want to live in where community is that go-to spot. But then when it comes to society, which was the second part of your question, what I see is, well, I've been in quantum for 4 years now, so I'm really just viewing like the difference between when I was 14 and involved and now, and the difference is huge. Like the
Yes.
amount of startups that are involved, the government investment, the even just the sheer amount of people who now understand what quantum computing is. Like when I was 14, I never had met anyone else who like just a regular um during a regular conversation that also knew quantum, but now many people do, and they'll like explain the classic 0 and 1 superposition, and they'll get a
Yes.
little bit about quantum. So in 5 to 10 more years, I really think that it's going to be a lot more of a household name. Maybe not completely, but definitely like people will have heard of it, and they will a lot most of them will understand just like elementary principles of quantum and that. And I think a lot of people actually interact with it as well. I just think it'll become like slowly creep into our lives a little, just because of the vast amount of progress that various companies and governments are making in it, like Australia, for example.
Yes, exactly. It's people are beginning to hear it in the news and everything like
Yeah.
that. So I keep encouraging people to keep sending on your questions. I've got one here asking, and can Anisha tell us, is there a link between quantum computing and AI, artificial intelligence? That's a great question.
Yes. So there are many links. I can actually talk about one specifically that I looked into when I was actually ninth grade with that support vector machine video. But a lot of AI relies on data sets and being able to train them. And to train data sets, I would almost imagine it as you have like a grid with a bunch of dots on it, and you need to draw a line through it that separates it into cats and dogs, for example. But a lot of times what happens is that that line is very difficult to see, and it's very difficult. You can't draw a straight line through it because there's so many overlapping traits. So you have a little bit of error, and that's why most models aren't perfect. But what you can do with quantum computing is I almost imagine it as like you have the computational power to now project that 2D scatter plot into a third dimension and draw a 3D like plane between it. So now you're no longer looking at it in 2D but 3D, And you have just more possibilities to separate various types of data sets, which would vastly improve the quality of artificial intelligence, decrease that error. But there are so many more applications of artificial intelligence. And I think the thing about quantum is that because we're so new in this field, it's hard to even tell all the different directions that the technology could take us into. And so personally, I'm very excited to see that. I can only talk about what I've personally researched and witnessed, but there is so much investment and so many different companies like the wonderful like Sandbox AQ is working on AI and quantum that are dedicated to that field. So 100% an overlap to answer your question.
Yes, and just to add to that, you did just mention Sandbox AQ, and they really are doing some amazing things with quantum and AI, which is now called AQ.
Yeah.
So very shortly, I don't think you would bother with an AI unless it has a quantum computer behind it. Now,
Yes.
our time is up, but I did want to ask one final question asked by a worried mother in Morley, which is one of the suburbs here in Perth, in WA. She said, can quantum computers be used for bad things?
Yes. So we've been discussing a lot about post-quantum cryptography, and to kind of back that conversation up a little, the whole reason why that's very pressing is because of this idea of Q-Day or the quantum apocalypse that everyone thinks is coming, which is the idea that in the hands of a malicious actor, even in the hands of a non-malicious actor, quantum computers have the power to just unlock a lot of our standard cryptographic systems. So a lot of our cryptography right now is based on factoring basically, which is an elementary skill and prime numbers. And quantum computers easily can break through that at a certain point in our future. And I think the assumption that everyone is making is yes, in the hands of bad actors, because obviously a great actor doesn't necessarily want to hack into our world's most secure financial systems, but yes, in the hands of a bad actor. So yes, it can be used for bad, unfortunately, because it is a powerful device. It's the same way that at the onset of the internet, people were worried, what can the internet do bad? And today we're seeing a lot of discourse about that and like ethical data sharing, which with movies, even like The Social Network and what they expose about society. But yes, I think as a whole, what we need to do, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't go through with the technology because progress is necessary. It just means that discussions along the way need to be had sooner rather than later about what the technology also entails on both sides of the spectrum and how we can address them. I think what we did with the internet is we waited a little bit too long until the effects of the internet were already in play and the negative harms also started to come into play. And then we started tackling them. But I'm happy that you're even asking this question so early in the quantum development process, because that's such a good sign.
Yes, I absolutely concur with everything you've just said. And look, we have run out of time, unfortunately. Anisha, you are amazing. And it's been wonderful to have you this evening. I think we first spoke, you must have been 15 or 14.
Yeah, it's been years. Yeah.
It's been years. Yeah, you couldn't even appear on the camera because you were too young, quite rightly so, I might add. But it's great to see, number one, it's great to see you doing so well. You doing things for society, which is what we all want to do. Now, please, let's stay in touch. And if you could help us with our hackathon and STEM clubs and everything we're doing at Quantum Girls, yeah, we'd love to have you tag along, and it will be wonderful. So again, thank you very much indeed, and I'm sure we will talk soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And anytime any of you want to talk, you're free to reach out, and I hope to see you all soon. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Anisha. Wow, I mean, she is a wonderful role model for everybody in West Australia, in the world, never mind in WA. But I think, as Anisha said, and on behalf of Quantum Girls, what we really want to say to any of you young school children watching today, we want you to do the same sort of thing as Anisha, and we will help you and support you. Quantum Girls is for you. So thank you very much. Now, next week, I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I think we're doing something on quantum games and how quantum games can get people, young people involved with learning actual quantum technology. So it's all part of the process. Thank you again, and look forward to seeing you soon. And I'll leave you with the clip of World Quantum Day walking through Pawsey Supercomputing Research Center. Thank you.